can't think of a more appropriate speaker for the CCAP partners at this particular stage. Brian's background is in architecture from Manchester and then landscape architecture in Arizona. And this was followed by a wide-ranging career as an educator and as a researcher at Illinois, at Penn State, and also with links at the University of Sheffield and Melbourne as well, and work in India, China, and Tanzania. But I think his extensive work overlaps particularly with CCAT in his specific use of social science approaches to innovative applications of computer technology, and basically in engaging with a wide range of stakeholders. So he's a background in serious games to communicate complex systems. And there's a really interesting one called Energy Chickens that sounds very intriguing. But it's also his work in GIS with the global environmental and design community that led to him, along with Carl Steinitz, setting up the International Geodesign Collaboration. And I understand he's currently working on augmented reality on the coast in Georgia. So I think with that background, he's got many ways that he can contribute to CCAT or engage us or lead us in different directions. So Brian, I would hand over to you if you'd like to share your screen or whatever way you're working with us.
Yeah, I'll do that in just a second. But first of all, yeah, thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you, Chiara. I'm lucky to have met Chiara and Karen through this International Geodesign Collaboration. So I know some of the characters involved here, and I know very little about CCAT, but I'd like to know more. Certainly having that introduction to you all fumbling around in VR a few minutes ago. So anyway, let me do as promised and share my screen. How are we doing with that? Can people see the screen okay?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, it's come up now. Yep.
Great. Okay, so well, first of all, yeah, my career has had several kind of pieces to it. There's always been a technology piece alongside the social science aspects of the environment piece. So it's always been a two kind of threaded career. And the technology side has been pretty strong for since about 1985, which I think is when I got my first personal computer. So I've been dabbling in this kind of work for a long time. And the most recent manifestation of that is the work that I'm doing with Micha Taylor, who's also on this call. Micha is a PhD student, and he is working particularly on this augmented reality application, but it's really an evolutionary step out of a number of other things. So let me get into the presentation. Not knowing quite what your interest was, I'm going to do a presentation in three parts. One is going to be a little bit of background, going over research. This is the more social science oriented piece of our work, going through some work on the Georgia coast, which is suffering the effects of coastal climate change. The second part of it is, using one of our first kind of thoughts about how to do augmented reality in the context of communicating coastal change. We did an experiment, and the experiment popped out some results, admittedly with student respondents, so a limited sample of respondents, but it popped out some results that kind of surprised us and changed the direction of our thinking. And so the third section of the talk is going to be about that changed direction and specifically about the kinds of things that we're working on at the moment. So this is the history of the Georgia coast, and we have been hammered by hurricanes in the last few years, and this was kind of interesting because this situation came to the coast of Georgia after a time period of almost 100 years when no major hurricanes had impacted the coast. So there was a sort of a complacency there. So 2016, the first hurricane came. Myself and a colleague, you saw named on the title slide, Meredith Welch Devine, who is an anthropologist, she and I approached the National Science Foundation and got a small project funded to look at people's attitudes and intentions towards migrating away from the coast in the face of the kinds of changes that were going on. we luckily we got that money, we got that funded very, very quickly. And of course, we're part of the way into the study when Hurricane Irma, 11 months later, came along, and the opportunity to look at people's responses to 2 hurricanes in a space of less than 12 months. And one of my proudest moments was getting a new project or an extended project funded through the National Science Foundation in about 36 hours, including all of our internal human subjects review. So we were able to get that project going very, very quickly. But this is the kind of impact of those hurricanes over the years. And last year, as you can see, I'm sure you know too, that there was a tremendous hurricane season with massive amounts of economic loss in the United States, which of course has all caught people's attention. If it hadn't been for COVID, we would probably be spending a lot more time sort of responding to these things at the moment, but our attention has been elsewhere. So asking people about their responses to that, there are 2 kind of main categories of response. There's the sort of long-term sea level rise change, which is slow and incremental, and it takes a long time for people to sort of realize and respond to what's going on around them. And then the other kind is the short term. These are the severe storms, unpredictable. They tend to impact individuals, and that's where the impacts occur rather than community-wide impacts. And recovery is generally possible because we have our government sort of responds with disaster relief, directly targeting individuals after things like severe storms. So there are 2 different kinds of responses, 2 different kinds of situations going on. This is a kind of the typical kinds of responses. A lot of people are living in low quality housing. So we've got crushed mobile homes, caravans, flooded yards, and you can see coastal erosion washing away the beneath coastal homes. The homes are already on stilts to protect them from storms or storm surges, but the coastline is being washed away from underneath them. So I'm not going to go through this at all, but I wanted to show you these are the, we ask people, why do you live here? And it's not really surprising. 3 big factors. They like the pace of life, family and friends in the area, and to some degree there's a jobs and financial side to this. The Savannah area, which is on the coast of Georgia, Savannah is poised to be the biggest container port on the east coast of the United States, because it is the Savannah River is being dredged to take Panamax cargo ships, so the deeper container ships that are able to go through the Panama Canal. And then Savannah sort of feeds the eastern half of the United States with its rail connection. So there is a lot of work in the area that people are moving for. What might make you leave? Loss of quality of life was huge. That was a huge factor in people's minds. No longer a relaxed area. Loss of natural beauty is a big factor why people might not want to leave. They really are attracted to the area. It is a beautiful coastal area. Loss of social ties, family and friends leaving. Financial and personal security. The loss of employment is a big sort of question mark in people's minds. Although, this, like I said, the situation in this particular part of the country is really quite good employment-wise. But then when we asked them this question, then sea level rise and severe storms did pop up. And it's not surprising because we were asking these questions in the aftermath of these two very, very severe storms. And this is from the anthropological side of the study. We interviewed a subset of people. We surveyed close to 3,000 people in the coastal area, but we interviewed about 80. And these are the kinds of responses, and some of it is denial. We're far enough inland that unless it's a big storm, it's not going to be a problem. And then there's also the amenity side. Where would I go to get 6 golf courses, a fitness center, etc., that kind of thing. Had you ever thought about moving away? No, I love the place. I'm not going to move. There's a lot of attraction, strong attraction to this particular piece of the coast. And this is, how themselves adapting to sea level rise and damaging storms. These are the kinds of responses we get. A lot of confidence that people have that they will be able to storm and flood proof their own homes. It's probably, given the damage, it's kind of one of those things where, it's going to happen to other people, but it's not going to happen to me kind of responses. Going right back down to when we were asked questions about, would people move away? There's a strong resistance to moving away from the area to where they came from. And our takeaways from this study, and we've got quite a string of publications out of this, is sea level rise is a concern, but the biggest concern that is the severe storms. That's the people that's catching people's attention. Very hard to get them thinking about the effects of sea level rise, and it's probably because it's very incremental, and this particular part of the coast is protected by, in many cases, several miles of coastal salt marsh. It is the only part of the eastern seaboard of the United States that does have that kind of protection. And that's probably sort of making it hard for people to figure out response to sea level rise. Individual experiences and situations are so variable. We've seen a lot of policy responses that say, well, we'll send extra funding to the poorest people or to the people that live closest to the ocean. And what we found is that there's no single factor of age or race or income or education level that drives people's intentions to move. In fact, somewhat, I guess, opposite to what we had originally thought was that the richer, better educated, older people are the ones who are most reluctant to move. And to some degree, it's because they've got resources, they can rebuild. They are there because they bought the amenity of being right on the ocean, and they are very reluctant. So it's like you would expect the sharp, well-educated people to move away. Actually, they're not the ones that are going to move away. It's the poorer community that is actually much more open to thinking about moving away if they had some aid to do that. Anyway, one of the issues that came out of this was it became pretty clear, and this is through the interviews, it became pretty clear out of the study that people didn't actually really understand what some of the remedies are for, what are some of the responses to this? And, are we going to retreat? Are we going to armor the property we're already in, or are we going to abandon it? And people didn't really have a conception of this, which is why we started thinking about the augmented reality approach. Well, maybe we could show people what was likely to happen to them. And also maybe we could show them what the past was like, so that they could get a sense of what is this, what's the extent or what's the scale of the current changes or the expected changes relative to what has happened in the past, because we need people to be able to put this into historical context as well. So our question is, what if we could help them see the future? What if we could help them understand actually some of the invisible issues, like the potential flooded areas or the areas that are particularly sensitive to other kinds of ecological, we were thinking about this in a much broader sense. What about other kinds of ecological impacts? Where are the endangered species in this area? We have, woodpeckers and other kinds of things, tortoise that are endangered species in this area. So migration, development to migrate impacts a lot of other kind of factors. And so our question is, could we make more of these visible in this decision-making setting? So that was when, drawing on the on the technology side of my background, that's when we started to think about bringing an augmented reality approach into this, so that we could show people what was going on. And also, we started to think about, could we collect people's insights as they go about daily life? Could we use the augmented reality to ask them questions about their reactions, about when they're actually in the place, rather than as an abstract, let's take you to a classroom or a community center, show you these things, and then ask you, what about it if they're actually in the place? How would they respond differently? And these were the kinds of images, the historical and future images, that we overlaid through the first version of the augmented reality app that we created. And this is the one where I said we did a pilot study. We were not quite ready to go into the field, but we had access to a whole lot of undergraduate students taking summer classes. So we asked them about what their preferred remedies were, having seen what we were doing, having seen the augmented reality app, what would they prefer? And the student response is, maybe, I hope it's not because they're student landscape architects and thus not very thoughtful people. But we did ask them, about this, and because, they thought enhancing the natural buffers was the way to go, to really do this. And some of the things like abandonment were not things that they would want to see as responses. And, what's going on in our minds is, boy, natural buffers are wonderful for certain circumstances, but for the scale that we're talking about of an entire, hundreds mile long coastline, some of these things were, against the kind of impacts that we're talking about. There were just going to be the kind of natural buffers we could put in would simply be inundated by the kinds of 2-meter storm surges that we're talking about as a result of the, in these hurricane events, the 100+ mile an hour winds that are associated with them. So what that led us to do was to go back to the drawing board essentially and think about, this issue of engagement, motivation, understanding, and how could we get people more deeply into this. And in this same kind of time frame, this was my colleague Meredith and myself, we had been having, and I hope you'll all approve of this, we'd been having regular one afternoon a week sort of thing. We would go for drinks with a colleague of ours from the history department, just kicking around ideas. What could we do together? And there must be something cool that we could do together, and enjoying good beer at the same time. But we, our historian colleague, he has a website which is called sorry, I'm getting the name scrambled up here, CSI Dixie. So Crime Scene Investigator Dixie. If you want to Google that, it's a very, very cool website, CSI Dixie. Anyway, he's very much a storyteller. So we started talking about this, and we started talking about the power of storytelling. So how could we use our AR platform as a storytelling platform? And we could see the potential for it, the ability to be able to use our augmented reality app to tell people stories about places when they were actually in the places. And we did develop a virtual Darien, Georgia, a small coastal town on the coast of Georgia. Micha put the coastal Darien together with avatars that we could interview in there. But really, our kind of main interest was more the sort of geolocation kind of triggers to these. So instead of having to go to a virtual reality to interview people, what if triggers delivered audio, if you're in a car, or audio and video as you're walking the streets of Darien? What if the AR app was location sensitive in that way, so that we could get place relevant stories? So this is the current version of the app that we have, that is called You Are Here. And our first sort of go around on this, we realized that there were actually, it was as we were heading out to do some field work in the area to sort of really get a handle on this whole coastal area, we thought, well, what if we just visited the historic markers? Every county in the United States has got a sprinkling of historic markers. So we decided that for our introduction to the county, we would go and visit as many as we could find. And there are actually 52 historic markers in McIntosh County, Georgia. So we visited all 52, and we were really struck. And I'll show you a slide of this in just a couple of slides here. We were struck by the incredible variety of stories on these markers. Some of them are very old history. Some of them are recent history. There are rum distillery markers There are Civil War incident markers. There are famous poets living in this house markers. There's a whole range of different stories, which in a sense kind of reinforce for us the potential power of this storytelling approach. So our app, as you drive around or walk around, the app alerts you to where you are or to what markers are around you using audio. So it's location sensitive. And if you hold up the app to the historic marker, it uses the marker as a trigger then to pull up, and you can see the little images in the frame, historic and future images on a timeline. And you can scroll along that timeline, and by just touching the display, you can bring up historic information about that location. It is possible for you to try this too. If you search on the App Store, either in the Google environment or the Apple environment for "You Are Here," the app, and then sorry, I actually, we would need to do this for you. If we give you a set of the markers, we could point you to a Google site with the markers on it. You can use the marker as a target on your display, and then figure out or see how it is that the app works. But that's the app that we have, and this is the kind of so this is the thinking now that we're working on, the stories that we collect via our app. So the app shows people places, and then it asks them for their responses. It gives them the opportunity, either audio or by typing on the screen, to give us their stories about these locations. So the stories we collect are authentic. They're from people of the place, from the place. Their perceptions may not match scientific findings about the area, but in a sense, they have every bit as much validity. They're just coming from a different sort of framework, different time set. And when we share people's stories alongside science findings, we have the potential to enrich the decision-making setting by having both these kinds of stories, but also in a sense to validate both sides of that. You can validate the storyteller by the scientific findings, and you can validate the scientific findings by the stories that are coming from people that actually live on the coast and see what it is that, what changes are happening in their everyday lifetime. So, the expectation or the hope is that we empower people to be more open about sharing their expectations. And this would lead us to be able to encourage more action to actually do things. And these are so to show you that this is the kind of material that's in the app, and these are the markers. So you can see, we've got the history of sawmilling. This was this area has a not very happy environmental history of soil loss, etc., and captures 26 men captured. And then on the other side, this is the stories from different viewpoints. Butler Island Plantation. The Butler Island Plantation, as the more recent 2019 marker tells, was the site of the biggest sale of slaves, enslaved people in the United States. Over 400 people sold in a single sale when this plantation. But it gives you, you're able to get at different kinds of perspectives based on when it was the markers were actually established there. And we're deliberately not, there's no such thing as an accurate depiction of the future of the Georgia coast. We don't know what it's going to be. We don't know when the storms are going to occur. We don't know how bad they're going to be, etc. But what we can do is we can provoke discussion through the showing what it would be like if a plausible storm occurred in these same locations in coastal Georgia. So I'm sorry, I've gone a couple of minutes over my presentation time here. This is us, and I'd be really, we would be really happy to hear from you and have any kind of, be able to respond to questions that you might have. And I think we'd certainly be interested in collaborating with the CCAT network if there's a vehicle by which we can do that. Thank you.